Most people think that all yogurt is probiotic. These big brand yogurts, these commodity yogurts, pasteurized post-fermentation. And so you actually receive nothing when you're eating. And that's when, again, like Alon is my best friend and my co-founder in this experience. And she like took over our kitchen with a yogurt machine, and she was like so into it. And she said, she was like, you know what? This is insane, Kiki, but should we just scale yogurt? Should we scale this thing that's already been helping me? What we're trying to do next is we really care about two KPIs. One is, do we have 30% customer retention? And number two, what is our demand actually? I have over 10,000 Instagram followers. I have this audience now. How many of those actually, I could tell you how many live in New York, but how many actually want to buy yogurt? Because we have an expiration date, right? And so you have 2 weeks to move 10,000 units of product across New York City. I need to make sure that my customers are so ready and activated to buy the second we hit the grocery shelves, or else we might lose that contract with Whole Foods.
Tell us a bit about your journey before you started the whole idea and you conceptualized this whole brand.
Yeah, happy to. I guess like we could start from the beginning a little bit. I grew up in California, in Northern California, and actually my dad grew up on a dairy farm. And so dairy is not, I never expected that I would be back in this space, and he never expected that for his daughter either. But anyway, it's some funny family roots. And so my uncle actually still operates and runs the dairy farm, and my cousin will be running that too one day. Anyways, so that has been part of the family. I grew up in about an hour north of San Francisco, in sort of the wine country area. My family grew farm grapes and sold them to wineries. And so that was, a big part of my upbringing, was like on an ATV in the vineyards every summer. And so agriculture was always sort of the supply side, right? Was always something that I was very much steeped in. We also had a huge garden. And so we just cooked a lot from everything that we harvested in the backyard, and never sort of we never sold those things. We just sort of bartered with the neighbors, like chicken, eggs for our tomatoes, sort of thing.
The old way of doing business.
Exactly, the old way of doing business. We would have 50 tomato plants every summer, and it's just the four of us, our family. So there's no way that we can actually eat everything from the garden. So, but we cooked a lot, and I think like we almost never bought fruit or vegetables, right? Like it was always just coming from the backyard. So that's a huge thing. It's like the emphasis on whole produce. And then I went to Stanford, and I really had no idea what I was going to study. But what I was attracted to about Stanford was the interdisciplinary and sort of innovative aspect of the education. There wasn't just English or history or economics or biology. There were so many other majors that wove together multiple disciplines. So you could be sort of constantly engaged in thinking through more complex problems and approaching them in a more complex framework. And so I was really, really attracted to that. And I actually ended up studying human biology, which is one of those interdisciplinary majors. It was sort of the hard normal bio, right? So you did evolutionary biology, cellular biology, microbiology, like anatomy, physiology, those sorts of things. After leaving Stanford, I graduated in 2020 during the pandemic. And so it was just sort of an unsettling time, of course, for many people. Unknown. And people's start dates were being pushed back for their first job. And it was just all a little bit, who knows? And so I actually was lucky and ended up working at Alpine Investors, private equity firm. And I wasn't, I wasn't on the investing team. I was working for post-close portfolio operations. A lot of people ask me, like, what is that? And it's basically internal consulting. So you are working with operators and all of the portfolio companies after you buy the company over the lifetime of the hold that my firm held them for, and you're helping to grow their businesses through different disciplines. And so it was never actually, on the horizon. But when I started to think about what was next, it wasn't like North Star on founding a company. It was North Star on creating impact, getting to be creative and build. Going back to that like interdisciplinary thing, I wanted to have my hands in every single aspect of a bucket. And so that looks like potentially working somewhere super early stage or potentially starting something myself. And going to be sort of on in all those ways. And that's when, again, like Alon is my best friend and my co-founder in this experience. And so we talk about everything together. And we were both having this crisis. She had been working at our company for 4 years and similarly loved it, learned a ton, and was ready for what's the next challenge. And so as we got more and more, she had been making yogurt herself to heal her own gut for many years. And actually, we lived together post-graduating Stanford in San Francisco. And she like took over our kitchen with a yogurt machine. And she was like so into it. And that was her thing. And she's sort of the crazy mad scientist, biohacker, peak performance athletic girl who's doing that all the time, running experiments on herself all the time.
You're the private equity consultant. You're the business guy.
Oh, crazy. And she said, she was like, you know what? This is insane, Kiki, but should we just scale yogurt? Should we scale this thing that's already been helping me? And it's a really hard problem, but it's not an unknowable problem.
Perfect. That was perfect. I almost felt like as you were going through your story, I was like, everything sounds like it was leading up to this point of you starting a yogurt company. From your family roots in agriculture to you studying human biology in a place that's as innovative as Stanford, to actually landing a job in private equity, not on the investing side, but on the operating side, and actually helping early stage companies kind of go through that. Seems like everything was pushing you in this direction already. And then finding a friend who was working on this thing as a side and was ready to kind of go all in with you as well. So
totally.
That's quite an interesting story. But one thing that I wanted to ask is, you spoke a little bit about everybody being a founder these days. And a lot of what you post on Instagram is also about how you quit your 9 to 5 to become a founder and start a yogurt company. What was that point where you decided, okay, finally, I gotta go all in on this? And what was the spark there?
Yeah. It is, there's like so many things there. I think the biggest thing that I've learned about, and again, I think I wouldn't have known this if I just had graduated and started a company. There is something so powerful. I'm about to sound super woo-woo, but there's something so powerful about putting all your energy into one thing. And I think that you cannot expect, like, there are people who can do this with a side hustle. There was no way that I could do my job and like my 9 to 5 and run Beny to its fullest potential if I was splitting my time. And it was something I knew immediately. Like it was super scary. I remember last July, so 6 months ago, Alana and I were talking and we were sort of making commitments and we were saying, a year from today, will we be working full time on this? And I was like, I guess maybe. And I was so nervous about it. And it became so clear the second we said we're doing this, that we could not hold both jobs. Like it was just not going to happen. And that's because I wanted to pour my entire self. Like I'm used to being an achieving person. I wanted to pour my entire self into this. And it also felt really bad to not be pouring my entire self into the commitment of my private equity job. And so that was something that was like, okay, for our own sanity, we need to do this. But also Beny Yogurt cannot be successful if we're half-assing it. Like there's actually no way that we can make this and grow this to the scale we want if it's a side hustle. And a lot of people have metrics or KPIs. We want to hit 1 million in revenue before we jump ship. We want to do whatever. Like, yeah, super fair. There are so many like fiscally sound reasons to do that. For us, we're 26. We have no dependents. We just have our rent to pay. And we felt in a position that we could cover that for a bit with some savings. And we like some things lined up of just like, hourly jobs to like help pay the rent essentially.
Yeah.
But it was much more like, we need to make sure that this runs fast. We want to put our whole weight behind this. And that's really important. Yeah.
And from the looks of it, what I see on your Instagram is that you're really doing this in like a proper bootstrapped way, which is you're kind of manufacturing it yourself, right? And so it's just the two of you right now. Can you explain a bit about your operations right now? What scale it's at, and how do you sort of make sort of your deliveries, as I must say, that I see on your
That's
Instagram.
a great question.
Yeah.
the scale is not where we want it to be. Let's just be very clear with that. And I think that there's something that's like so funny about building in public is you gain an audience before you actually have like created success. And so like, that's just the banner to this. Is in no way have we become successful in any sense, though I think that there is a validating proof point in the fact that we're able to gain an audience. And so that's like step number one, is that there is now a brand in existence. We are currently making out of a small commercial kitchen, and we're making like 25 to 50 16-ounce jars of yogurt a week. And that is all Alon. I do none of it. Awesome. I help deliver, but otherwise she's completely on all of the like production operation side of things, like literally tactically sterilizing things, everything. That's a pay-per-play type model, right? When you're using a commercial kitchen space. And so there's a fermentation period for yogurt. There's a straining period for yogurt, all of those things, which is why, you know, as one person and one small facility, we can't actually scale up very well. The issue that's happening is we are now hand delivering those yogurts to a bunch of people on our wait list. We have a text message line. We're sending them messages. We're hand delivering the yogurt. And that's been great to have physical touch points with customers. Again, this is not to grow our revenue. Like we would be doing a very different approach if it was just to go hard on and like, let's get to 1 million as quick as possible, which we still want to do. But right now it's about developing that strong customer base and that continual relationship with our customers. So that way we have a feedback channel and we can keep iterating and have those loyal fans. So that's really the point of these drop sales. We really don't need to do them because they're not actually, you know, helping our bottom line much or top line much, but it is just there to, to really establish those relationships. What we're trying to do next is we really care about 2 KPIs. One is, do we have 30% customer retention? Are at least 30% of our buyers repeat buyers here? At least 3 times. And number 2, what is our demand? Actually, I have over 10,000 Instagram followers. You know, I have this audience now. How many of those actually, I can tell you how many live in New York, but how many actually like want to buy yogurt and are coming here and are signing up and all of those sorts of things? And we can't tell that right now because we are not making enough product to actually saturate. But we can't even fulfill people who want to come back because we are just trying to get more people exposed to the product. We don't have enough product. So our next phase is actually being able to make enough product. And again, that's very bootstrappy. We are looking at production facilities upstate that are tied to dairy farms, some that are, you know, small co-manufacturers where we actually can go up there and we can make 1,000 units every 2 weeks, truck it back down to New York City and sell. Can you guys help us sell? Because we need these 2 KPIs to be able to get into grocery stores and feel confident about not wasting product, because we will need to move product once we're on shelves. So pay 10,000 followers, get out here, show up. And this is a proof point and a validating thing for us of what we need. And so that's sort of the next big push before we end up in grocery stores. Yeah.
That's very bootstrappy, but kudos to you.
Super bootstrappy. I mean, here's the thing. Is like, we were also thinking about not doing that. We were just going to go straight to a co-man, do an minimum order quantity of 10,000 units and already sign contracts with some grocery stores and just go in. Now, the issue with that is I think that that's a lot of upfront capital that you potentially waste because we have an expiration date, right? It's about a month that yogurt can exist in a refrigerated shelf. And you don't want your customer buying it on the last day of the month. You want them buying it at least 2 weeks, right, before that. And so you have 2 weeks to move 10,000 units of product across New York City. And even if I have a deal with Whole Foods, there is no guarantee that I'm moving more than 10 units a week, right? That's just like, there's absolutely no guarantee. So I need to make sure that even though like technically Whole Foods is my buyer, I need to make sure that my customers are so ready and activated to buy the second we hit the grocery shelves, or else we might lose that contract with Whole Foods, or else we might lose $30,000 because we just put that in to do that production run, whatever that might be. So even though it's bootstrappy, it's also like, in my eyes, a way to also prove out and build success too.
Yeah, I think the shelf life consideration is a huge thing, right? Because I mean, for these distributors, for these retailers, it's all about how much is the product moving, how fast it's turning over. And if it's not turning over, then as you said, right, you risk being delisted, and then it's a steep climb back into the shelves with these guys.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but my question is, you've done a really good job at trying to test out the demand first before you commit a ton of capital, or hire other people or raise external funds. But there are some people who say that, you can kind of just create a landing page, collect X number of email IDs, and that's your test, right? But you're doing it a very different way, where you're actually getting some product on the ground moving and getting real-time feedback. So do you think, if this would have been just like a landing page or just your digital presence, you would have gotten enough feedback to make certain decisions? Or do you think that product journey was super important?
It's a great question. It's both. Like, we have a landing page, and we do, right? We have 350 people on our wait list, and we have 800 email subscribers. And it's been like about a month of us having that. So that's great, right? Like, pretty good. I'd love to have 5,000 email subscribers. I'd love to have 1,000 people on our wait list, but it is what it is. We don't push it every day. It's not like something that we are really focused on. So in a way, yeah, but I actually think that like there's a much better case for us. This is, again, I think it's just like a risk aversion thing, right? Like, we are taking a huge risk by doing this. And so we're trying to mitigate it in as many ways as possible by getting the product out there. And the other thing is, we are not D2C. And so that's a really big difference also. It's not not just that we're perishable, but we have plenty of other founders, friends who are CPG, who can just do the landing page, do the wait list, run a few paid ads in different areas and have people click on and see like what brand works, what brand doesn't, what people respond to, and what their demos are, what their demographics are. For us, like, we are not ever going to be shipping yogurt. And I mean, I say that, maybe we will, but like probably we won't. And so it looks different. We need to make sure that people are actually activated to come in person and to come to a grocery store. And so as much as we can simulate that environment rather than just, again, a waitlist situation, that's sort of the reason for us. I think it can work for a lot of brands. It's just like something that there's like another layer, I think.
I mean, talking a bit more about the product itself, right?
Yeah.
So yogurt as a category has kind of blown up a lot in the last 3-4 years. Even where I live in APAC, we see a lot of Greek yogurt products coming in for gut health, for protein, right? But since when I've been following you, I think what you're building is quite different from what's there out on the shelf. So maybe if you could take a few minutes to kind of talk about how your product is different and what's missing currently on the shelf that you're looking to provide with this.
Yeah, I love it. I think there's two main product differentiations. One is the actual like formula, right? So the actual product, what's different? We are a grass-fed organic dairy yogurt that has all the probiotic benefits you would find in a supplement. And I think that's sort of a misnomer, as most people think that all yogurt is probiotic. All yogurt has live bacteria that turns the milk into delicious yogurt. And they actually like need to have those certain bacteria by, standards to actually be called yogurt. And they do a really good job at making delicious yogurt, but they're not actually the most impactful bacteria for our gut and for optimal human health. And so they are, bacteria, but again, it's not what you would find in a probiotic supplement that you would get off the shelf and you would take every morning. And so I think that's like number one reason why most yogurts don't have what we have. The other reason is often these big brand yogurts, these commodity yogurts, pasteurize post-fermentation. So all yogurts pasteurize pre-fermentation. We do that, etc. Like, that's just to kill any bad bacteria in the milk. But then you ferment with the specific bacteria to make it into yogurt, and it grows and grows and grows and multiplies. And then these big companies pasteurize it and kill all that bacteria, the good and the bad. And so you actually receive nothing when you're eating. You have the protein and you have the good nutrients, but you don't have anything alive in that yogurt. And that's because it extends the shelf life. And so it makes sense from a business standpoint why they would do that, but it doesn't actually, again, make any meaningful impact on your gut. So we are not doing that. And that's a big thing. Again, it's a logistical challenge, operational challenge, because now we have a shorter shelf life. but we think that that's worth it. And something that we really hold as our North Star is food is medicine, right? Like we don't want you to have to take all these powders, all these pills, all these everything every morning. We want you to have the thing you love every day and be able to gain the nutrients, the probiotics, and everything necessary for you to function optimally. So that's sort of the number one on the product formulation. The number two about what's different about our yogurt is I really do think that the way that we're building our brand and all the marketing around it and creating this audience and community is really different than any other dairy product, like let alone yogurt. And you go to the yogurt aisle and there's a lot of opaque brands. At least I can speak for the US. You go and you see these big, huge brands and you know who they are. They're Chobani, they're Faye, they're any of the Danone owned brands, like all of those guys. And then there's farms. There's these small farms, and that's sort of the bifurcation of the yogurt brands, at least for us. There's none that actually speaks directly to the consumer in any way. They're sort of hitting on that crunchy granola, organic feel from that small farm, or they're these sort of big commodity brands. And I think there's really, really an opportunity for this everyday staple item food to sort of come reach out to the, Gen Z buyer, to the millennial buyer, whoever it is, and have a real relationship and association to what that brand means and what the story is behind it. And even if that story is do something good for your gut and you see that and you can connect with that and you can feel that, or that story is, hey, this person has been building in public and I've learned a lot about what this is and I've heard this brand, right? And there's something there. And I think that's something that we are really trying to disrupt as well in this sort of boring refrigerated case.
Yeah. That's quite interesting. I didn't know at all about that whole pasteurization process, because you see yogurt on the shelf, and I mean the packaging and everything talks about all these like billion probiotics or whatever, but it's just dead probiotics, and 99% of the consumers don't know about that. So I think education is a big part of what you're doing as well, right? Yeah, and
100%. And the other thing I'll say is like, there are a lot of yogurt brands who don't pasteurize post. Like there's a lot of the smaller ones don't. So they're not lying by saying that, by the way. But many, like the mass consumption, the yogurts that like most people are eating do pasteurize. So yeah. And there's a lot of misnomers about that, of what actually goes on. So I agree. Education is a big thing. Trying my best to educate people.
One Instagram follower at a time.
That's exactly one Instagram
follower at a time. I have a difficult question to ask here, because when I see brands that are working in the clean label space, and they're really trying to be true to their process, their ingredients, right? It all looks good, really, really good at the start. It works, right? But as you've admittedly also said right now, it's like it is a logistical problem, right? When you want to scale on retail shelves, when you want to conquer the whole US, supply chain issues prop up, right? So as a founder, right, let's say with your current process and that effectively 2-week consumption shelf life, Beny Yogurt can kind of scale to like a 10 million brand. To scale from 10 million to, let's say, 100 million, would you ever be tempted to play around with the formulation, the ingredients, or do something that some of these big companies are doing, or no, not at all?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, there is the brand, and I don't mean that in like that would be a very hard and difficult decision. Would I be tempted? For sure. And I think that's something where, does all of Beny need to hold this full mission? Yes. Does every single SKU need to be exactly in line with this? I don't know. Like, I don't know if that's actually true, right? There's you look at any brand, there's like Chobani, and there's a lot of different SKUs, and there's like the highest end and also the lower end of it and all those things. And I think that there's room for that in any yogurt brand or any brand, just period. But I think something at a very small scale, what we're thinking about right now is glass versus plastic. I think that's a very, like, again, we're not even at the million revenue, right? But we are thinking about, we can't get to 1 million revenue if we don't have a super loyal customer base that loves us. And maybe that loyal customer base really cares about microplastics. And that's like all that people are talking about right now. Brian Johnson's talking about microplastics, just like don't die, blueprint stuff, like it's everywhere, right? Like, and so we also know that that's part of our target customer. And so even though that's such a headache, and I am sort of anti for a lot of operational reasons, like we might not be able to get to the next milestone if we aren't able to immediately capture those really critical buyers who care a lot about glass. And then we move into plastic down the line, right? The other argument is we start with glass and then we start with plastic and then we can sort of like tier it up if we would like. Who knows? But yeah. So it's really hard. Don't know.
Yeah, it is. It is hard. And I'm sure you kind of figure it as you go as well. But I think one of my takeaways from what you just said right now and what you were saying earlier as well is focus on one thing at a time, whether that's like a career decision of focusing all in on your startup, or even while operating the startup, what's in front of you. Right now, it's community building, getting real feedback, getting product to as many of these loyal followers as possible. Right. I think that's like a really good takeaway, because I mean, I speak to a lot of people who have a lot of ideas, okay, like I want to start X company, whether that's in tech, whether that's in CPG, whether that's services, right? And they talk a lot about dreaming big and, how some people say, like you should shoot for like $1 billion industry. But what's your message to them having gone through, this journey, right? Like, do you want to kind of break their bubble and be like, hey, think about the billion later, first focus on getting that first dollar in.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I think that's well said. I think there's like, I fall into that trap, by the way, every day. I'm like, oh my God, this is this huge, like we have this market and all these tailwinds and all these cultural trends are happening back to dairy. And like, regardless of your political beliefs, like the whole make America healthy again and like RFK stuff that's happening. Like there is definitely a trend back towards dairy and we're seeing that in all the ways. And I get very excited and huge and here's all the product lines and everything that we can do. And I always come back to, we cannot get anywhere if we can't get our first, we have our first milestone of like our first 1,000 recurring customers. We cannot get anywhere unless we have those people and we have to be laser focused on how we get there. And I think it even happens again, like that's a huge vision of like, how do we be all this dairy, food as medicine in the aisle, like all these cold food products. Actually, even below that, like how do we even get in the grocery store aisle? We were incredibly fixated on that. And then we realized, actually, we can't even get in the grocery store if we don't have that first 300 loyal customers who continue coming back to us and continue coming back to us. And so it's like a constant zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, and realizing that like the thing right in front of you, you need to nail in order to get the thing ahead of you. And say like my big caveat is like, there's always going to be urgent things. And so as much as you can think strategically and always like, there's a million decisions in front of you, there's a million fires to put out. What's the most important thing you can do with your time right now? It's also a very important exercise to lay.
What are one or two things which you found out after jumping knee deep that, okay, this is way harder than I thought about it, while I was in my 9 to 5 or while I was conceptualizing this brand. But these 1-2 things are like really hard as a founder.
Yeah. I mean, as a general founder, it is, everyone knows this, but it's so wholly consuming. It's all I think about. It's all I can talk about. It's all I am. And I think it's exacerbated by me being on social media. So like it is in every aspect of my life. There's no escapism. Like social media is no longer an escapism. It's work and it's like a total work channel. Right. So I think that's number one is that has just been complete takeover. You can't switch it off, which by the way, I wanted, I asked for this a little bit, but it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
And then I think number two, we already knew this, but we now know this even more, is like matching supply and demand for a refrigerated perishable good is really, really hard. And I'm not like advise anyone against it. We haven't done it yet, so I actually don't know if we can do it or if we're not, but we knew it conceptually, it was hard. And now we really, really feel it. It's like major problem solving every single day on how do we actually match this well and time this well and like time it because of the expiration. So maybe that was a little too like niche of a thing that I learned, but I went high and low. Yeah.
So you've had this interesting experience that you're now currently a founder who's building in public. You're building it from scratch with the least amount of capital possible. You've been on the other side, in your previous 9 to 5, where you were like sort of a consultant, right? And you were sort of an advisor. And there's always this debate that, when you're consulting someone, when you're an advisor on the outside, you kind of only get a surface level view. It's only when you do it, you get actually into the depths of something. Do you agree with that now that you've seen both sides of your career?
1,000%. 1,000%. And it's like, I had this feeling of being always at a 10,000 foot level when I was in my previous job. And like, it was fun because you're constantly working on these different problems and like different types of companies and you're learning about different things. But at the end of the day, no skin off my back. Like it's on the operators to actually implement what we're doing, to make sure their businesses are growing, to make sure their people are happy and engaged, like all of those things. And that's exactly what it is, right? For me, it's like, hey, I can talk to as many people who are 3 to 5 years ahead of me, who are way better at building content, who have owned and run dairy farms, who have done all these sorts of things. But ultimately, like, I'm the one who's seeing how many followers I gained. I'm the one who's executing on this. We're the one who's making the yogurt and getting the real-time reaction. Like, it is totally, fully, like, we have to wear all of those wins and fails, like, on our back every single day. So, yeah, you don't even know, like, the half of it, I think, when you're at a high level.
Yeah, I think you just ended the debate right there. And it just like kind of also goes to show that it's like a lot of it, people think from the outside that, being a founder and, I'm sure some of your 10, followers from that 10,000 follower list think that, it's so cool what you're doing. But actually, when you start to do it, it's not sexy. It's really a lot of hard work, right? I mean, I haven't even started a company yet, but just running this podcast, for example, just putting one piece of content out there feels like a chore to me sometimes. So you're doing that with your business full time and taking such a huge risk. So I can totally imagine.
And I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned in this is like, you're never going to know. I was never a content creator before this, nor was I founder. So the vibe is like learning everything on the go. And so done is better than perfect. Like just getting something out there every day, at least for me, like that's my metric is 5 times a week doing a reel and making a reel. And I don't even have, I have follower goals and I do have goals around that, but it is for the most part just about testing a bunch of content and just seeing what sticks and what lands and holding myself accountable to it. Because I think there's a lot of things that are involved in success, but I think that there is, at least in some part of it, like how long you can do it for and like the repetition and the amount that you can put behind it over a long period of time. I think people underestimate, like if I did that, if I do 5 a day or 5 a week for 5 years, like there is going to be something that comes from that. And so similarly, I think about that with our business too, is, hey, maybe it's a slower start than if we just popped up in every single grocery store in New York. But imagine doing this and extending, our community of 30 people to 300 to 3,000 to 30,000 to 300,000, like what that looks like over X amount of time can really actually build a lot. And so it's not tomorrow, but it'll be there.
Yeah. No, that's super inspiring as well, because I feel so many people don't start just because, they're like, okay, I don't know what to do. I'm not perfect at it. That's one of the common excuses. The other one is more like the fear of failure. And here you are, you kind of started putting yourself out there even before you had a product in hand. And you have, I'm sure it's daunting, right? You have like about 10K followers and you're still building that, and that fear, you're conquering that fear every day. So I think that's such an inspiration for people who are just ideating and not starting because of that.
And something that I will say about social media is like, I am a convert now. Like, I love this thing. And and I say that because it's just increased my surface area for success. Like, I think that there's so many more opportunities that come from it. People we would never have met. Like, there are so many things that I would never have been able to connect with certain founders. There are buyers from grocery stores who are reaching out. There are bakeries who want to do collabs with us. There are so many opportunities that come from me building in public and building in this way that I think, and you know what? The most important thing is customers have grace and empathy when it comes to, we don't have product yet, we can't be here, because they understand the hardships and the challenges and what we're going through on a new level than if we were to be building behind the scenes. And so I just am super pro social media. And if anything, it's also completely taught me, it's honed my skill at storytelling. And I think that's a really important quality of any leader and anyone who's going to be, sort of sharing and selling. I've never been a saleswoman, and now I have to do that every single day on my Instagram. So I think that's part of it too, is like, how do you authentically sell something that you're passionate about? And it's really been a forcing function to get good at that.
Yeah. I there's something similar to what the other founders I've been interviewing. They're very pro building in public. Like, one of the guys I interviewed, he just picked LinkedIn as his channel of building in public. And now he gets 1 million impressions a week or something. And his main channel of sales is through people reaching out on LinkedIn, like buyers, companies just interested in product.
It's amazing.
Right? Yeah. So it's like, pick a channel, pick what works for you. For you, it's Instagram. For someone, it might be Twitter, X, LinkedIn, right? But make sure you build in public. I think that's a key takeaway for everyone listening to this.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable. It's like really uncomfortable. My co-founder is extremely uncomfortable with it, and I'm just like, nope, we're doing it. Like, this is what's happening. But I think it's not natural for a lot of people to share wins and fails and setbacks and these sorts of things. And so I also can totally understand why it's like a really difficult thing for some people to do, because it feels kind of like the antithesis to what you should be doing, which is only sharing the shiny and the good and what would sell and all these sorts of things. So it's uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just about what it leads to in terms of leads or people supporting you, but there's a lot of that angle of real-time feedback, because I was going through all of your reels before this podcast. One of the things, the earlier reels, was about how you chose your name, which is Beny Yogurt. And I think there's an element of your followers also voting on that, right? So can you tell us a bit about that story?
Yeah, the branding was like so fun to engage people in, and was a really, really cool exercise where we didn't even know what our name was. And that was one thing actually that we didn't involve people in, because that's, I think, just can be a messy thing. But we were thinking about colors, we were thinking about fonts, we were thinking about designs, like all of these types of initial mock-ups and graphics. And every day I did a poll, every single day, on like, should we go this way? Should we go this way? What are we thinking? We were thinking about orange at one point, purple, greens, like just completely different. We landed on blue. But also that was like a very intentional thing that I explained a lot through that process of, most yogurt is blue and white. And we want to be clean and clear and appeal in that way that we're dairy. So to go orange is like a bit uncomfortable, but we also need to stand out on a shelf. And so how do we stand out on a shelf in this type of way? A lot of people wanted greens. And then we thought about, okay, but you see green, like, is that kind of gross on a dairy product, right?
Yeah.
And so there was so much real-time feedback that we were iterating on both on our end, but then sharing that analysis and then asking for more feedback from the audience. And, sometimes we take it, sometimes we don't. Just like in any other situation with work or project, you ask for feedback and you don't have to take it, but you've sort of included everybody in the process. And I think that creates buy-in along the way as well. It's like people feel bought into the vision that you built because they feel like they've been a part of it and they've contributed. Whether you've taken their feedback or not, they've contributed in a way to what that end result looks like.
Like I've seen people build in public, but not to the level of personalization and kind of community that you guys have done it. And I think it's great. I think that it's just a very positive thing. And that's what got me as a random viewer on Instagram that just stumbled upon your reel to click the follow button. It's like, wow, this is so transparent. It feels like I already know this person.
That's amazing. And by the way, that's my goal. Like, I want this conversation. Like, I hope that I never feel like a stranger to people, because it's like what I'm saying on Instagram is exactly what I would say to you just right here.
Yeah.
And how I would speak. And it's so much easier for me. Like, that's just like naturally who I am, is I'm not going to hold back about what my opinion is, what I think, how we should be doing things, whatever it might be. And so to filter that and to, take a step back is actually much harder for me to put on Instagram. It's much easier for me to be this extremely authentic version of myself, because that's just what's going to pour out every day. And so if I'm making something once a day, like, this is the version that you're going to get. And I think you're right. It's actually played in favor in a way. We'll see if it scales, but for right now,
I think I'm pretty sure it's going to scale. I mean, just seeing the response that you guys have, the kind of loyal following that you guys are gathering, I'm pretty sure it'll scale, even if it's a slow and steady journey because of the operational challenges. I'm sure one day you'll get to that point.
Thank you.
Just one last question from me. For people listening to this who, let's say, want to start something, at what point should they start building a community? Because I know in your personal journey, you kind of negotiate like a 6-month notice period or something with your company, and that's when you start putting out content. And because you started so much earlier than product development, you were able to take your followers along the journey, get their feedback, and build in real time. So what's kind of your recommendation there? What's the sweet spot?
There's no like perfect sweet spot, I would say, and I only know my own blueprint. And so that's sort of my caveat. But I will say that helped me tremendously. So as much as you can build an audience, I guess taking a step back, you're building a community every single day, like just through your friends, through who your network is. Every single interaction, I strongly, strongly believe you can learn something from every single person, and you never know who the person is that you're talking to. And so showing up as your best self as much as you can and making those connections and seeing the world like in your everyday life as potential community is number one, like the best thing that you can do to start it off. Because you would not believe the number of connections that are coming back to me from like 10 years ago that I barely even remember, but they are now here because of an impression that we made on each other 10 years ago. And so that's number one. Number two, then, I think, is the intentional audience building. I think that can happen at any point. I wish that I had created more of a personal brand prior to starting this 6 months ago. There's such a push on LinkedIn now, to post all these things or whatever it might be. You don't need to be an influencer in any way. But I think just having a point of view and making that known and having some sort of audience can do people huge wonders. And so that doesn't have to be about building a company. It can just be in the area of expertise that you are in your current job. And, that's something that now I'm building on LinkedIn and now I'm building in other places. But in some ways, I think you can start now. And then the actual push to building in public and really, really intentionally creating an audience, I think gave me incredible momentum and security to feel like I could actually jump full time come January. And so that was incredibly necessary. I would do that 10,000 times again. I start 6 months before, because the day we quit, we had so many raving fans. People were so excited for us. And that felt, even if it was like false momentum, because it's not really sales or anything like that, there is a feeling of being pushed and being elevated. And people know us in New York, and I get stopped for being the yogurt girl and at networking events VCs come up to us and ask us about who we are because they've seen videos of us. And so it creates some engagement and enthusiasm that really only helps your confidence, because there's so many things that can beat you down as a founder. And so if it's only for me and fuel for me to keep running, that's also a huge reason to start early too.
Awesome. No, that all of that makes sense. And yeah, I think those are all my questions. That's the pod. But thank you so much, Kiki. It's great learnings, and already I was part of the behind the scenes by just being a follower on your Instagram, but just having this sort of in-depth conversation and really getting inside your mind kind of makes me an even bigger follower. So thanks a lot, for your time today, and I'm sure everybody listening to this, learned a ton about what it takes.
Thank you. Thank you for reaching out. This was a great conversation.